Hello again, everyone. This is Jim here with another video update. I have sort of an aggressive agenda for this update. In fact, it's going to be a part one and a part two. I've got pages and pages of notes, so here goes. Hopefully I can pull this off. About 3-4 weeks ago, right after the beginning of the year, Gary Taubes, the famous author, tweeted a link to an Atlantic Monthly article, and that article was an excerpt from a book that was just due to come out. And the book is what I want to talk about. It's the whole subject here today. The name of the book is The Elephant in the Room: One Fat Man's Quest to Get Smaller in a Growing America. And the author's name is Tomlinson. And that title grabbed my attention right away, being a former fat man who went on a quest to get smaller. I was really curious, so I read the excerpt in the Atlantic right away, and I had two feelings after reading that. Number one, it looked like a book I had to read. Number one, it was well written, and the author, Mr. Tomlinson, was sharing some very in a public way, some very private things about being overweight, what it's like, and not only to be overweight, to be what's classified as morbidly obese, and I could relate to all of that. And I was compelled to read. I knew I had to read this book. Also, though, I have to say, just based on some of the comments that he made in this excerpt, another thing I was drawn to is to know, okay, this quest to get smaller, what is it? What is he doing? And how successful has he been? And is it like mine? I think that's what I'm passionate about now, and that's why I created this channel, is to talk about, how to change yourself and how to get smaller, especially for somebody, like the author and myself, a person in your mid-50s or morbidly obese. So I wanted to know, I think I'm always maybe trying to validate what I did, or to compare or to talk or whatever. So anyway, I was drawn to that. I was a little concerned because there wasn't a lot of details in the excerpt given, but the few that were made me wonder if this is really, it's talking about things like the conventional wisdom, like, eat less, eat healthy, avoid fat, that type of thing. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, this is not at all what I did now. So anyway, I had to read the book. So that's what today's update is about. In the first part of this video, I'm going to talk about the book, go into a little detail. This is not going to be a rigorous review, anything like that. I'm not a book reviewer. I just want to talk about the parts that stood out to me, what I really liked about the book. There is a section I have of what you're going to call constructive criticism about the book. Anyway, part one is mainly about the book. Part two, which I encourage everyone to watch also, because I think this is going to be I think it's very good and you'll like it. Part two is something I was inspired to do from the book. And in the book, the author talks about a concept like, he calls it "You Suck FM." And the idea is in our brains we have a mental radio station, and in our brain there's a channel called "You Suck FM," which is constantly playing the negative, reinforcing the negative in your life. That you're going to fail, that you shouldn't try. It's just everything negative. And I certainly could relate to that. I listened to that station for many, many years. but I started thinking about that concept of this mental radio station with different channels, and I started thinking about my weight loss journey. And then I realized, it's not just one channel, and I've identified more channels. I've got 3 channels, and I thought about it and I fleshed it out a little bit. So I have this concept I want to present. Basically, I'm extending the analogy of the mental radio, and that's in part 2. Okay, so we're talking again about the elephant in the room, one man's quest to get smaller in a growing America. And the author is Tommy Tomlinson. This is a new book. The author, I wasn't familiar with him before reading this book. Tommy Tomlinson, he spent 23 years as reporter and columnist for the Charlotte Observer, where he was a finalist for the 2005 Pulitzer Prize in Commentary. He's written for publications including ESPN The Magazine, Esquire, Sports Illustrated, Garden and Gun. His stories have been chosen twice for Best American Sports Writing Series. He now hosts the podcast Southbound from WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news station. He lives in Charlotte with his wife. So he's apparently, I'm not much into the sports or reading about sports, so I wasn't aware of him, but apparently he's quite accomplished in that arena and actually very well known. The book, okay, he's, I'm going to say about in his mid-50s, and a successful career as a writer. He describes in the book, he's very successful in terms of family life, his marriage, his upbringing. He's had a good life in all respects except one big one that's haunted him, and that's why he wrote the book. He's always had a problem with weight. He's always been, let's be honest, the fat guy from when he was a little kid up until even now. I think he's would consider himself fat. In fact, his book starts out with, I'm going by memory here, the first words are, "I weigh 470 pounds." Those are the hardest words I've ever had to write. And it is because when you're morbidly obese, you do not run around telling people what you weigh. Hey, guess what I weigh? First of all, you don't weigh very often because there's no scales that can handle your weight. And you don't want to know. Like me, I didn't want to. I wanted to live in denial. I knew it was bad, and I didn't want to know how bad it was. And certainly, if I did know, I wouldn't tell anybody. Hey, guess what I weigh? It's something you keep to yourself. But so the book, it recounts his story late in 2014. After this is like around Christmas time, the death of his sister, his beloved sister, from complications of her own obesity. It caused Tommy to, just reevaluate things and to motivate him to change. It just kind of sparked something in him that he's got to do something. And I'm just going to quote, I don't know if, maybe I'll share this. Being obese affects others around you. And he put it into some very nice words. He says, for every one of us who can't shed the weight, there are spouses and parents and kids and friends who grieve for us. We carve lines in their faces. We sentence them to long years alone. Now, isn't that poignant? And it's true. And that's he started thinking about himself. He's getting into his 50s and being morbidly obese. I went through the same mental calculation. Look, the odds are not in my favor. It's gonna drag you down, and you're not gonna live to a ripe old age. I was going through the same calculation, seeing my age advancing, getting closer to 60, and with my weight, I knew what that meant. it's a motivator. It really is. So that was the motivator. Unfortunately, it was the death of his sister. So he began his quest at that point, and it started basically the beginning of 2015. His book really goes into substantial detail about his life, from a child, how he was brought up, with his parents, in school, in college, his beginning career, his mid-career, his relationships. And specifically, it covers how food interacted with his life, and how food kind of shaped his life, and how, you can just see the food addictions that were built in from a very young age. So his weight in food, he tells his life story essentially through the lens of weight and food. And he's very open and honest about that. He, like I said, not only talks about his weight, but he talks about all the inner struggles, the shame, the embarrassment, the things you don't say in public, the things you don't tell your wife or friend or anybody, the things you just endure. He's very public with that, and throws it out there. And I think this is probably the most valuable part of the book, that confessing those things and being honest like that, because I think no matter who you are, you can benefit from understanding the perspective of being a morbidly obese person. And just I'll give some examples of, these kind of ugly things that you don't talk about to people, or embarrassing things. Like I already mentioned, revealing your weight to others, that you never do because you're embarrassed. Details about what your body looks like naked. I mean, there are some things you don't share. It's really not. It's not a pretty sight. Okay, there are things that happen with stretching and other things, discolorations. It's not good. He talks about how getting out of bed, there's a procedure to do that, and this is stuff. All of these things, I see myself in them. I recognize them. I live them. And I was morbidly obese. I was never quite to his scale. I topped out at around 350, but it definitely all applies. Sleeping was difficult because you can only stay in a certain position so long, and there's only certain positions you can be in. And then getting out of bed, you got to roll a certain way, and there's a certain process in order to not hurt your back and not to get winded. And it's embarrassing. The whole subject of restaurants and airplanes, the seating. You go to a restaurant, and I remember what I would always do. I would try to be the first one to speak to the hostess, and when the question comes, table or booth, table, because the last thing you want is a booth, because frankly it's going to cut off your circulation, or your gut's going to be hanging on the table. You can't breathe. It's really uncomfortable. And I used to like going to a diner and sit up at the table in front there, where there's the stools are fixed, because it's a fun place to be. You're up where the activity is, have a coffee, have a breakfast, but those stools don't move, and you get to a certain size, you just can't fit in there. So, and airplanes, don't even go there. It's such an unpleasant experience to travel when you're overweight. The extended seat belt, the fact you can't put your table down and eat a meal or drink a coffee. You gotta balance things. You gotta sit in an uncomfortable position, otherwise you're gonna really impact the people around you. It's horrible. I hated it, especially long flights. Just shopping for clothes. The thing we do, he confesses the thing we do. I did. He calls it a secret gluttony, and that's, these runs to fast food places. I would do them. People didn't know what I was doing. I did secret runs through fast food. It was secret gluttony. Yeah, I was at McDonald's all the time, and Wendy's, and you name all of them. And I'd always be picking up fast food. Not being able to stand how the weight even affects. I mean, he went into some details how it affects your intimacy. This is stuff that's not said. Mr. Tomlinson talks about it. To his credit, I applaud him for that. Whether, like I said, whether if you're overweight, if you're in that category, maybe this will give you some motivation to get out of it. If you're getting heavier, it might be motivating. If you're not heavy at all, it might just give you a better appreciation for the morbidly obese person. And it's not because these people are, lacking willpower. They're stuck and they're trapped and they're suffering to an extent. So I hope from this, sharing his book and making it public, that it will make people kind of understand a little bit better, maybe be a little more sensitive in terms of things they say and accommodating others. That's my hope, and that's a positive part of this book in my view. The bulk of the book, I would say, covers his life story, as I've just mentioned. Recollections of his career and food and weight, and it's very good. And he's very descriptive with it. And it's clear to me why he's won some awards for writing. This guy's a good writer. And I like that he has a descriptive, visceral style that you just it hits your senses. And I'm going to give a couple examples. I don't know if this is legal to do or not, but I'm going to share two quotes that he did, one for his dad, one for his mother, and how he describes them, just as a quick example. And here it is for his dad. My dad wore blue work shirts with his name patched on the chest. He always looked a little caved in, as if somebody had just thrown him a sandbag and his shoulders were sloped instead of squared. But his forearms were creased with muscle, and when I hugged him, his back felt like an oak. He was built for work, not for show. He had a bald spot the whole time I knew him, and held his comb-over down with a greasy gel called Score. It smelled like spilled gasoline. I put it in my hair for years so I could be like him. And can't you just feel, you can see and smell this man, you know him already. And that Score, that brought back memories. I used to throw that in my hair for the same reason. I don't know, because my dad used to put that greasy stuff in his hair. And then here's one paragraph on his mother. He says, "Old age has shrunk my mama some. I used to rest my chin on her head when I hugged her, and now I have to bend down to do it. I remember her with big hair and big glasses and sweat beading up on her upper lip as she cooked supper or pulled weeds. She wouldn't go to the movies because they wouldn't let her smoke. Even now, on the backside of 80, tethered to an oxygen hose, she is as tough as boat rope." And again, I love that. I love these little expressions. She's tough as boat rope, or the one with the father, is back like an oak. This is the style I'm talking about. The turn of phrase that just very hits your senses. So that it's an enjoyable book. Before I go into the criticism part, I want to state, just saying that, a couple conclusions I have about this book. I'm just cut to the chase. Whether you're overweight or not, I recommend this book. I like the book. The author is a likable guy. He's gregarious. You can't help but pull for him. He's the kind of guy, you'd like to, sit down with at a coffee shop and talk, whatever, sports or weight loss or life, whatever. Uh, I like him, and he's obvious to see why many people like him. He's clearly a gifted writer, and as I said, I applaud that. And I just wanted to say that up front. I'm recommending the book in case anyone think otherwise. Okay, so now looking at areas of the book that I wasn't as pleased with, and maybe you can call it some criticism or some inconsistencies. Not covered in so much detail in the book are the details about the quest to get smaller. And that's right in the title of the book, One Fat Man's Quest to Get Smaller. And I took it from that title, and I would guess that many people took it that this was going to be like a success story with a lot of details about how to lose weight. And it's not that. It's an accounting of his life, and there are some details, but not overly detailed at all in terms of what he's doing. He's following what he says, what he started. His quest was a very simple 3-step plan, which you can boil down to he wanted to run a 1,000 calorie per day deficit. So it's the old calories in, calories out. He also mentions that he has been wearing a Fitbit for, I guess, for steps, to count steps and to log in food. But there's really no detail given at all about how many steps he was logging or how frequently, any of that. There's no mention of that. And the food, he doesn't mention. I mean, he mentions food like he'd go month by month during the year of 2015, and he'd give a month summary. And he would talk about challenges that came up that month, either personal challenges with family or friends or his pets, or his career, or celebrations, or different food that came into the picture. But nothing specific. The details weren't there, and that's what I was looking for, details. He would just give a tally, a weight tally, beginning in a month, this weight, end of month, this weight, total difference, and for the year. So it was a check-in month by month, but it's I found it lacking. His plan also, he mentioned several times, his plan was to, quote-unquote, eat healthy. But eating healthy, he didn't attempt to define that, and I don't know what it means. And it just really depends on what you mean, because a lot of what the conventional wisdom says about eating healthy is not so healthy. So I found that lacking. So we get, these weigh-ins for 2015, and then, it kind of at the end of the book, there's a couple updates, and it gets real sparse. What happened from 2015 on? And he gives right at the very last page of the book, there's a summary that ends November 17th. His weight is 375, so he's down a total of 85 pounds. That's like 3 years into his quest. Bravo for making progress. That is some progress, and I know he's trying to go slow in that. But what I'm also interested to know, and what I don't know, is that, that's November of 2017. What's happened since then? Where is he at now? And I think this is what really bothers me. How is it going? Where is the rest of the details of this plan? Where is he accountable for it? I know we have the book, but the book doesn't have much. And so I tried to research. I went on YouTube and Googled. I tried to see if there was after the book came out, if there's any interviews or any discussions, what's the fresh information? What's going on now in Tommy Tomlinson's life with respect to his weight and his quest? Where's he at? Because again, this is my passion now. I lived it already. My quest started August of 2016, and it was over at the end of 2017. I lost 190 pounds. So, I'm looking to see. I think personally, I'm always looking to validate my quest. To know, I'd like to see other people have that kind of success, and to know I'm not some freak or whatever. But so I'm interested in this stuff, but there was no details there. So anyway, I did find one recent interview. It was an NPR interview with Tommy Tomlinson. It was either just before the book was released or just after, so it's fresh. And again, I've mainly just covered the book, but right at the very end of the interview, the interviewer asked Mr. Tomlinson, "How's it going now, Tommy? Like, where do things stand with you?" Which, finally, this is what I wanted to know. And he gave an answer. He said something like, "Well, I'm happy with where I'm at, but I'm being coy about it because I want people to read the book." And wow, that did not sit well with me. I mean, because first of all, is it just about the money, just about getting people to buy the book? Second, after reading the book doesn't have the details, and we don't know how he's doing today by reading the book, because like I said, the book ends, the last thing we know about his quest was from November 2017. So to me, I'll just be honest, that's a cop-out, and it's not showing the real brutal honesty like he did in the book with his weight. And this is one thing that just sort of bothers me. He's really brutally honest in the book about certain aspects of being morbidly obese. But I don't feel he's being brutally honest with us, or with maybe even with himself, about his quest. He did say in the NPR interview that he's pleased with his progress, and he has made progress, but he doesn't give any specifics about his weight or where he's at. And so I'm left only to speculate. I mean, this was on YouTube. It was a video. I can only speculate, and I hate to do that. And I hate to sound like I'm raining on somebody who's trying to improve themselves. I generally do not do that, and I'm not doing it in this case. This is a book review, though, so I'm being honest. My perception from looking at him now in the video is that I guess he's still in the upper 300s. The last weight in the book he mentions, he's 375. Gosh, he looks like he's got to be in that area. So if not worse, I'm not sure. I'm not sure, and I don't want to speculate too much, but let's say it wasn't immediately identifiable to me that, oh man, this guy is another year plus down the road, and he's losing weight. So I don't know, something seems out of balance there, and I think you get my point. It just, what I'm saying is, it looks like he's going very slow, and I think I know why, is because of some of what I said earlier. Some of the things he talks about are not from what I would call effective methods. In the book, several times he talks about salt and grease, like they're evil things that, really make us fat. And it's just totally not true. Those were not the enemies. They never were the enemies. So I have a feeling there's still some the changes that need to be made, and they could get into a more effective weight loss. That's just a personal judgment on my part. So it's January 2019. He's now in his 5th year of his quest. So I guess all I'm saying, maybe you want to consider some different voices and accelerating the process. I know he wants to go slow. I don't know how much you want to go slow. You want it to be sustainable and not go backwards. But nobody says, yeah, I want to, if I want to take 10 years to get this weight off. Nobody really wants that. But you do want to be successful and sustainable. I understand that. A couple other, I'm just going to point out briefly. There are inconsistencies, a couple of them. I'll just give an example. There are some inconsistencies throughout the book. He rightfully rails against the TV show The Biggest Loser. He hates that show. I hate that show. I hate it for the spectacle that it is. He points out that it made, it just really embarrassed the people and is like a freak show. But I hate it also for what it is. It's the how it wrecked the contestants' metabolism by the caloric deficit, extreme caloric deficit coupled with extreme exercise and a healthy diet. The Biggest Loser formula is a failure, and it doesn't work, and the show proved it. And I think he even interviewed some of the former contestants, and they're ruined. Yeah, their metabolism went down and it got broken, and it never changed. That's the problem. But here's the inconsistency. Mr. Tomlinson's plan, his 3-step plan, is caloric restriction, moving, getting some steps, and eating healthy. It's the same model as The Biggest Loser. Only The Biggest Loser, it is Mr. Tomlinson's plan on steroids. He's doing a slow version of The Biggest Loser. So that's all I'm saying. It's inconsistent. If he doesn't like what The Biggest Loser represents and what it did to those people, he's following the same model. I hate to point this out, but you got to realize that. Another inconsistency, which jumped right out at me, he rightfully talks about how exercise does not contribute to losing weight. And herein, I'm also in agreement. I found this out to be true. During all my unsuccessful weight loss attempts, I focused on exercised my ass off, and got nowhere. In the end, I would relapse. Yet, many times in the book, he kind of makes an excuse I call it an excuse. He compares like his obesity with his parents. His parents didn't get obese, and they're from the South, and they had a certain kind of good foods. His parents didn't get obese, he says, because they worked and they were active, whereas he had a sedentary job. Well, okay, if exercise doesn't take off the weight, why does the sedentary job matter? Why did the physical work that the parents did, why did that keep them from becoming obese? This is a misconception. And I can answer. I mean, if we're going to be brutally honest, his parents. He mentions in the book the what I call the secret gluttony. I'll bet his parents. I'll bet anything his parents didn't do that. I'll bet they weren't driving through the fast food places a couple times a day, chowing down when people weren't looking. I'll bet they were sticking to fewer meals and fewer snacks. They were trying to make ends meet, so there was less consumption. And I think if you're honest with it, there are reasons why they didn't get obese, but it's not the desk job. There are people at desk jobs that are thin, so it's not the exercise, it's not the desk job. Okay, you got to look elsewhere. there are other examples, but that's just a couple. Again, I'm not trying to be overly negative here, and I hope it doesn't come across that way. It's just I'm doing my part, to be honest. Kind of to summarize here, I do believe Mr. Tomlinson is ready for change, and he convinced me of that when he started talking about the mental aspects. And he brought up a concept about, he talked about like a radio station that plays in your mind, and he called it You Suck FM. And this is where it, the tape plays in your mind, the radio station plays in your mind that you're a failure, you're not going to succeed. It's an excuse to do nothing, to put your head in the sand. Why bother? It's just a bad place, and it comes on as time goes by. It just comes on, and you listen to it, and you get. It runs you down, and it's a very negative place. He mentions in this book now, part of his quest is realizing that he needs to tune out this You Suck FM. He needs to, get over the self-doubts, and he calls it like a process of growing up and taking responsibility. And yeah, I think that's part of it, growing up and taking responsibility. But I started thinking about this, and I recognize You Suck FM. I had that running in my head all my life. In fact, let me say this. It was so bad, I had given up. You Suck FM, in my mind, had convinced me that I would always be fat. I would never lose weight. And frankly, I knew that I was probably doomed to die an early death. And that's it. And I was just accepting it. You Suck FM was telling me to accept that fate. So I'm familiar with it. That station is not playing in my mind anymore. And there's a reason for it. And to me, I was thinking a lot about this. Why is it not playing? And it wasn't because I just felt like I grew up and I realized things and I don't listen anymore. It's much more than that. And so I have an extension to this whole concept of the mental radio. I believe there's more stations involved that need to be reprogrammed. It's not just You Suck FM. There are other channels. And I want to talk about that in part 2. That's the next video, is going to be an extension. I was inspired by the book and this concept of You Suck FM to come up with this mental radio concept of changing channels. And I urge everybody to stay tuned and listen to part 2, because I think it's good, and I think it could possibly help people. And I'm hoping that Mr. Tomlinson actually will watch this video. He's probably got every Joe Blow with a book or a YouTube channel telling him do this and that. So chances are he may not, but I hope so. So anyway, that's it for this one. I'll just say, I'll wrap up that as far as the book goes, again, I want to reiterate, I enjoyed and I recommend The Elephant in the Room, One Fat Man's Quest to Get Smaller in a Growing America. I recommend that for its enjoyable read, to learn about the author and to learn about what it is to be fat and how you can get dragged into it. Even if I'm not saying there's a plan, I said earlier, it's not like a how-to, this is how to lose weight or anything. Even despite my critical element that I went into earlier, I still recommend the book, even though it wasn't explicit on the weight loss. So that's it for now. Stay tuned for part 2.